Target 8 investigates. Is the Missouri General Assembly funding the state's education system constitutionally? Good evening, I'm Brittany Pieper.
And I'm Jim Rick. Thanks for joining us. The Constitution requires lawmakers to give a certain amount of money to education. However, legal experts and lawmakers say that's not happening. Target 8 Chief Investigator Jamie Gray is here, and this is much talked about at the Capitol right now.
Sure it is. You know, even just within the last week, you may recall that this was the very topic at the State House. The House and Senate had passed a bill looking to establish a 5% cap on a component of the foundation formula, which again in our state is how the educational funding is distributed amongst the districts. Governor Nixon then vetoed that bill, saying it has the potential to limit hundreds of thousands of dollars to the foundation formula, but his veto was overturned the same day. KOMU8's Michael Lindquist looked into the Constitution and court cases to find out if your child is getting a fair share.
The foundation formula saw an almost $500 million gap in funding in 2015, and that's not anything new. I looked into what Missouri's Constitution says about funding the state education system, and I dug through court cases to see if the Missouri Supreme Court thinks students are constitutionally promised the right to an equitable education.
We have fulfilled our constitutional obligation to support education in the state.
I think it could be challenged.
In Missouri, public K-12 schools are funded through what's known as the foundation formula, a mechanism of funding which is required by the Constitution. The formula dictates how much each school district should receive in funding per student. And according to Article 3, Section 36 of the Constitution, funding education should be the second priority under paying off state debt. Article 9, Section 3B states at least 25% of the state's revenue must be used to fund the education system.
Our funding is nothing to crow about now.
The Republican side says Missouri is funding education in the 30 to 35% range.
It is one issue that definitely affects everybody, and so I do think that we strive to meet that obligation.
But the Democratic side says it's closer to 23%, under the constitutionally required percentage.
Yes, I think we are not meeting our constitutional obligation, and we need to be addressing that issue.
When the bill establishing the foundation formula was passed in 2005, it was phased in through 2010. Since then, the foundation formula has demanded more money from the state, and the state has funded it less and less through 2014. An MU law professor says in a statement, in part, quote, "According to one detailed report, the state of Missouri pays a lower percentage of the total cost of educating its students than any other state except Illinois. We are 49th.
When we look closely at the formula, you see that it only provided, I think, $2 or $3 million in the first year. The promise was that eventually we'll add $800 million.
The state has been sued over the foundation formula before. This 2004 court case, first ruled on by a Missouri trial court, then upheld by the Missouri State Supreme Court, says that education is not a fundamental right under the Missouri Constitution, and that the state is not obligated to provide each student with an equitable education, as long as the state fulfills its 25% requirement.
In 1865, our education provision said that there will be equitable funding for school children in Missouri. In 1875, that was taken out.
He says the provision that was taken out, along with other provisions that required African Americans to attend different schools, made the 1875 Constitution known as the Jim Crow Constitution.
It seems ironic to take a provision which was part of a package that today would be viewed as unconstitutionally racist in its intentions, and use that intention as a basis for saying there's no obligation to provide equal funding to all children in Missouri in 2016.
The legislature passed a budget allocating an extra $71 million over last year to the foundation formula beginning in July. But there are still differing opinions on how your child's education is funded.
There is no way to fully fund education. Now, there is a way to fully fund the foundation formula. That's two different things. But with education, there's always going to be another program, something else we can do to help the children. It's a never-ending thing.
Don't move the goalpost and say that we're doing what, fully funding when we clearly are not.
You can find out how big of a funding gap Columbia Public Schools had on our website, as well as what suggestions lawmakers have for funding the foundation formula appropriately, along with full-length interviews with Democratic and Republican lawmakers, only on KOMU.com.
The Constitution does allow for tax levies in local communities, which is what voters in Columbia approved on April 5th. Again, there is an argument that schools may not be providing equal education when some districts can get voters to agree to pay more in taxes, while other districts can't get that support. Coming up tonight at 10, we'll continue seeing if your child is getting a fair share as we look at differences in student resources that can vary even within the same district.